Now you're welcome back. We are still talking about the passing of Diego Maradona. Very happy to say Graeme Souness joins us on the line. Evening, Graeme.
Good evening.
We're talking iconic here, to say the least.
Oh yeah, I think he's. Everyone has a different opinion about who was the greatest, but I think it's safe to say he would be in anyone's top 3 or 4. I was fortunate enough to have played against him several times. He went to Italy in '84 at the same time as I did. I knew a wee bit about him, but not a lot. Didn't know what to expect. First time I played against him was in a friendly before the season started, and it was just you knew you were in the company of greatness. If you're a player and you're seeing it close up because you're on the same pitch as someone, and when they're that good, I've played with great players prior to going to Italy, but he was on another level.
So I suspect he was in your sphere of the field at times. What did you try and do to stop him?
He was tiny. I must have been a good stone and a half heavier than him, 4 or 5 inches taller than him. But he was totally fearless. And he just had, if you tried to catch him, he would, he'd get himself in there and out of the way, or he'd see it coming, or you would bounce off him because he'd have his weight in the right place at the right time when he made contact with him. But, in those days, and that was the way it was, there was people who tried to kick him. You couldn't sicken him. He'd keep coming back. And he was just so special, it's hard to find words that you've not already heard about him. Yeah. But as I say, I regard myself as lucky that I shared a pitch with him, I don't know, half a dozen times. Because, as much as you want to stand back and applaud it on occasion, you can't. You're trying to stop him doing these things. And he single-handedly dragged Napoli, who were not, a big football club, but not a successful club, to 2 Serie A's in his time there. It's just so sad that another flawed genius that he couldn't. He obviously came under the influence of some really, really bad people, and it just ruined his life away from football. And that's why he's died so young, I would imagine.
Yeah, it does feel that way. I mean, to quote the man himself, he said, "I gave my opponents a big advantage. Do you know the player I could have been if I hadn't taken drugs?" And it seemed, the drugs had taken hold really from 1982, 83 territory, and then once he got to Naples, things kicked off on a whole other level. Obviously, he was banned for 15 months at one stage. I mean, that he was able to produce what he produced, given his life off the field, makes it all the more extraordinary.
100%. See, what you're talking about, great, it's a generation thing. In those days when he was doing the ridiculous things with the ball, winning games single-handedly, the pitch was different. The rules of the game were different in terms of there was, thuggery. It was allowed. People could, they were allowed a couple of challenges before the referee even spoke to them. And people would go out the way to because he was tiny as I keep coming back. He was tiny. Okay, he was full of power, but he wasn't. He didn't have a big physique as such. He wasn't someone you stand back and go, "Whoa, what a specimen!" But he was totally fearless. So you've got to factor all those 2 things in main. Not good pitches and people allowed to kick him. And he still produced the kind of performances he did. When you look at the pitches today and the stricter rules today, what Messi, what Ronaldo produce, can you imagine him playing today? Would he have possibly been better than Messi? I happen to think that Messi's the greatest player ever. And the reason I say that, and you can throw George Best into the equation with Maradona, because it wasn't about longevity. What they could produce was every bit as good as what Maradona could produce, but they've done it for a lot longer. You have to mention George in the same breath. There's a handful of people that you can talk about with that kind of ability. And Maradona was certainly one of them.
I don't know how often you go down a YouTube spree, but Maradona's there doing all sorts of things. And just as you were speaking there, it's reminded me of 1983 at the Nou Camp, the butcher of Bilbao breaking...
Goicoechea.
Oh, my goodness. It must be right up there as the worst tackle. Maradona said he compared the sound to wood breaking. I mean, it's horrendous what he had to endure. That was 83. I mean, that could have finished him.
Oh, easily. I mean, I think he didn't play too many games for Barcelona, did he? Did he play about 40 games for Barcelona?
Yeah.
He didn't play too many, and then when he came to Italy, I mean, what was he? He had about 8 years. 8 years with Napoli, but he didn't play too many games there either. I think I'm right in saying so. He must have a fair bit of time out with injuries. But when he was on the pitch, I mean, he was such a special talent, ridiculous talent. And I come back to it, like all the great players, they're fearless. You know, even today, people try to be physical to Messi. You can't intimidate him. You can't intimidate Ronaldo. They just, you know, they see it coming, and they're prepared to put their body on the line. And I know it's a different game today. It's not as harsh and as physical. But they're still prepared to do that, knowing that there's people out there who would like to hurt them.
Yeah.
And little Maradona must have, well, he did know that. Every time he went out on the pitch, he knew there was someone that was going to try and slow him down one way or another, legal or illegal. And he dealt with it. And he took the ball under pressure, surrounded by men who were trying to do that to him. He never flinched from his responsibilities. I'm sure you've had lots of people talking about, or you're going to have lots of people talking about him. But he's one of a handful that you know. I say to my son James, who's a mad football man. He's 21 years old. I've said this for the last 10 years. I said, enjoy this time, because you know people like Ronaldo and people like Messi don't come along every generation, and you know there's no obvious one on the horizon to come up to their standards. And when you think about it, there was Messi, and I'm trying to think if there's anyone in between Messi and these two now, and I can't think of one.
No.
They've been great players, but there's not been another one that's come, you know, Ronaldo and Messi are the nearest thing from the 80s to now. So, you know, we should be rejoicing his footballing life and feel sad for his family at this time, and sad for him because, you know, 60 is way too young, way too young.
And to jog your memory then, so ahead of the 86 World Cup, by his own admission at that time, he had failed to deliver on all the potential. He was 25 years of age. I mean, he was a phenomenon, obviously, but Napoli hadn't won a league title, Argentina hadn't achieved, and then whoom, you know, very quickly, 86 happens, and then first title with Napoli in 87. Those two teams, Napoli and Argentina, for instance, take Argentina firstly, Graeme, in 86. What do they do in 86 without Maradona? Are they close to World Cup winners?
Well, you know, I think that's a loaded question. They don't get beyond the quarterfinals. They might not even get to the quarterfinals.
Right.
I think did they lose their very first game to someone in the qualifying stages? I think they did. You know, I think they lost their very first game. I think. Listen, he carried them single-handedly. You know, goals change games.
Yeah. His
goals won them the World Cup. His goals won Napoli the Serie A twice.
Yeah.
You know, when people talk about one man doesn't make a team, but if you're that good, it does. And he did.
And from your time in Italy, you know, you went obviously to Sampdoria in '84, the same year he arrived in Serie A as well. Can you remember from your time there, was he like, you know, front page news? Was he on TV all the time? Yeah, he was big deal. Italians were obsessed with him too, yeah? Yeah,
because he had that magic. You know, he was a dribbler. He ran with the ball. He scored spectacular goals. And he was a flawed genius. So he's on the front page. If I say, obviously I can't remember in great detail, but he was always on the front page, and it wasn't just on the Monday morning after the Sunday matches. You know, Maradona in training, Maradona doing whatever. But he was the biggest name, and all the biggest names in world football were there at the time. But he was the biggest of them all. He was the one that sold the newspapers. He was the one that, you know, people talked about more than anybody else. He's the one that on a Monday morning would be eulogizing about what a ridiculous thing he did in the 90 minutes on the Sunday. He was ridiculously good. And I come back, I'm blessed that I shared the pitch with him, I don't know, half a dozen times. I mean, I spoke to someone else about him already tonight, and I struggle for words. Other than that, I feel I'm sad, obviously, but this part of me thinks that I was lucky boy to have shared the same football pitch as him.
Yes, I do know what you mean, because He was at a certain level that sometimes you need to just see what he did to really understand what we're talking about here.
Yeah, because if you're a player, you know how difficult it is for to do the things he was doing effortlessly. You know, as a player, you're aware of what your limitations are. He wouldn't appear like Messi, like Ronaldo. They would appear not to have, like George Best, appear to have zero limitations. They could do anything they wanted. Mm. And he's one of the handful of players that have kicked the ball.
Was it an open secret in the game that he had his troubles off the field during the early 80s, mid 80s? Word got around.
Yeah, I think it was written about as well that the company he kept in Naples was not conducive to living a good lifestyle. Mm. And isn't it strange that at someone pointed that George Best died on this day?
Yeah, 15 years to the day. Yeah.
Can you believe that? That's what a coincidence.
Yeah.
What a coincidence. Sad.
In terms of his best attributes, we're talking about someone who could do it all. I mean,
you don't become one of the best players ever with having any weaknesses.
Yeah.
You know, the names people you talk about: Pelé, George Best, Maradona, Messi, Ronaldo. Would you describe any of them as having any weaknesses or being particularly good at something? They were just particularly good at being brilliant.
Yeah. Well, with Maradona, what jumps to mind is the dribbling and just what he could do with the left foot, free kicks, shots, anything.
My lasting memory was him scoring a perfectly good header against England in the '86 World Cup. That's what I remember.
They're still going on about it.
Yeah, don't know why.
But yeah, look, it's as you said. I mean, who's in that group? Best, I guess, Cruyff, I guess, Pelé, Ronaldo, Messi, and then.
I'm not sure. I'm going to put Cruyff into that. I think definitely, and a lot of people scream, people will be phoning after this. For me, I'd put Pelé in it. The little I saw Pelé, but then definitely the current two, Ronaldo and Messi, Maradona. So we've got Maradona, we've got Messi. There's one in there, but I didn't see him. But the reason I'm going to mention his name is when I was a player at Liverpool, all of them said the best British player ever was who? And they must have been, when thinking about it, they must have been including George in this as well. Who does Bob Paisley, Joe Fagan, Ronnie Moran, and Shankly would have said the best British player ever? Who would have said?
John Charles? John Charles?
No.
Bobby Charlton?
No.
Go on.
Tom Finney.
Okay.
Tom Finney. And to a man, anyone who saw him play would say the exact same thing.
Right.
That he was, as I say, this is not my opinion. I'm telling you what real football people said. People I respected their opinions. They would include Tom Finney into this group. So how good must he have been?
Well, not too bad. So you do the math here, we mightn't see another who's in that group for another 20, 30 years very easily.
But that's, that is, there's no one, I don't think Neymar we thought was going to be a very, very special player. And I suppose he is, but he's not. He's not Messi, he's not Ronaldo, and he's not Maradona. There's no one else. No. There's no one else.
I've a soft spot for Zidane, but I appreciate he's not in that.
Oh no, Zidane. Yeah, Zidane. I would put Zidane. I'd put Zidane and Cruyff just outside that group.
Yeah.
They reckon Di Stefano was an unbelievable player. There's been some great players. There's great players, and then there's that handful that I think that are on another planet to anybody else. And it's a debate that anyone listening to your show tonight could have, and would all, if everyone picked their top 10 players ever, would all have a different 10. And that's how football should be.
But the one guarantee is Maradona's one of those in everyone's top 5 at least.
Yeah, and that's not just because we're talking about his passing.
No.
That would, if you'd asked this question yesterday, you'd be getting the same answer from me.
Listen, great to have you on tonight. Thanks so much, Graeme Souness.
No, pleasure. It's always a pleasure, guys. Cheers.